Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of That Early Childhood Nerd. I'm Heather Burnt Santy, and this is episode 3 of our second series on matriarchy, where I'm inviting people that I love to listen to and learn from to come and share women who've been influential for them or who they think other people should know about. So this time around, I've got Stephanie Goloway. Hi, Stephanie.
Hi, Heather.
And Suzanne Axelsson. Hi, Suzanne.
Hi.
Coming to us from across the world. It's nighttime at Suzanne's house, right? And morning time at Heather's house. Something like that. So I'm
Mhm.
really excited to hear from both of you. Especially I mean this round, I loved doing the first round when we did this last May. But this round I'm hearing like we're all digging a little deeper, it feels like, and I'm hearing about people that I should have known, like, how did I not know about this woman before? It's really the whole one of the reasons I started doing this is because when I was teaching my classes, I got tired of the opening chapter of every textbook talking about the same five white guys, and maybe we'll throw Maria Montessori in for some diversity. So this has been really, I think, I know it has fun for me. Anyway, Stephanie, would you share first who you're bringing to the conversation?
Yeah, I'm bringing Dr. Constance Kamii and Dr. Rheta DeVries to the conversation.
Yeah. I have heard of them. I haven't done much. I think I've read Dr. Kamii has written some articles in Exchange over the years that have been
Mhm.
published in Exchange, and I think that's the extent, or I see her name cited in other things that I'm looking at.
That was actually my first question. I was going
Yeah.
to wonder if either of you had heard of these ladies. No.
Nope.
Okay.
Suzanne says no. Okay.
And that's something that one of the things I kind of like to talk about is how come. And I
Yeah.
think honestly, age has something to do with it. And I think it has
Different countries as well.
different countries, although. mm, I'm not sure if that's the only reason because Camille especially presented all over the world. I don't know
Yeah.
if she got to Sweden, but I've been doing it's been fun doing a deep dive into both of them
Hmm.
um, in the past couple of weeks and seeing what they did and how that juxtaposes with my experience with them.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So go ahead, it's
Oh,
yours. Tell us what you want to
oh,
what you want to say.
okay, well, let's start with a quote
Mm.
because this is that early childhood nerd. Um,
Bonus points for Stephanie.
this was actually a quote that, so both of these ladies have passed away. And I didn't realize that Camille had passed away until I started looking for
Yeah.
current information
Not
about,
all that long ago, was it?
no, 2023.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was a little shock to me. But this was the quote that she chose, a short quote that she chose and is on her page on her website. A classroom cannot foster the development of autonomy in the intellectual realm while suppressing it in the social and moral realms. And for her, autonomy is it. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about, and I like as I started to really put all this together, I thought so much about Suzanne's work, which focuses so strongly on autonomy,
Hmm.
and thought, isn't that was one of the many connections that I made. And
Yeah.
I actually pulled out your book, Suzanne, to see if you'd actually, if she was in your index.
Yeah.
I would have done if I'd known about her.
Um,
It's second
so
edition.
yeah. So she is Constance Kamii and Rheta DeVries are special to me because I discovered them back in the 70s when I think both of you were probably in preschool and I was working on my undergraduate thesis on Piaget.
Mhm.
And I had gotten, I was only ever wanted to work with children and realized I wanted to work with young children when I was in college. And my college program was a psychology program in the 70s and very behavioristic.
Sure.
And I really just, I was like, I'm working with children every day, and this does not connect.
Hmm.
So someone suggested to me that I check out Piaget, who I'd known nothing about. I did. I started to read some original stuff. I started to poke around, do all this stuff, and I came across the names Camille and DeVries.
Hmm.
And as a very audacious 21-year-old, I wrote him a letter.
I love that.
There were, like at that time, there was
Yes.
email, everything. I don't remember what I wrote in this
Uh-huh.
letter, but something about, oh, I'd really like to know more about your work or something like I have no idea if it was a
Yeah.
specific or what. And what I got in response was this huge envelope full of drafts of chapters of the book that they were working on
Um,
their model of preschool education based on Piaget's theory.
Oh, that is fun.
Oh, it was so fun. I probably still have papers because for a young teacher scholar, this was like gold. And as I read the work, I realized that these ladies had the missing piece for me because Camille actually, she's Swiss Japanese American. Um,
Okay.
she spent some of her elementary school, she went to school in Switzerland and then returned after she went to college and actually studied off and on under Piaget and with Piaget for 15 years. And
mm,
so he actually wrote the like forewords to three or four of their books. So
Okay.
that was one thing. I thought, okay, well, this lady's got some definite cred that these other scholars don't have.
Hmm.
And the way that they and then she had been collaborating with DeVries at that time for a number of years. I imagine them in my head as these young women just like me who were just
Yeah.
being, and actually they were significantly older and
Oh.
were much more well established in their careers. But what I pulled out of it was that the importance of recognizing that Piaget was not a psychologist, he was not a developmentalist, he was a genetic epistemologist, and he was interested in these big picture questions
Mhm.
that as a young student, I was like, wow, this is really powerful. And what they felt their role was to take his work on equilibration, on adaptation, and especially on autonomy, and try to fit it into, or not fit it into, but help early childhood educators understand that his theory was not about ages and stages. His theory was about how we adapt as a human species and how knowledge is
Mhm.
constructed over not just an individual's life, but also over the history of the
Yeah.
species. And that without keeping that in mind, whatever we do with children in a classroom or in any caregiving situation or parents is missing the whole point of how and what we learn and how we
Mhm.
develop.
Yeah.
And it was just a
Yeah.
mind-blowing thing for me.
This is really interesting because I was trying to think. I'm trying to remember the context in which I've seen Dr. Kamii cited, and I know now that you say their names linked, I can like picture the linked citation in my mind. And I think probably the first place was a book that I read in the early 90s called, and it was maybe had been out for a while by then, The Piaget Primer by Dorothy Singer.
Mhm.
Um, and one of the things I find Piaget really interesting, and of course I just like wrote a whole book about schema. Schema play, which comes from Chris Athey, which came from Piaget. Um, but in my mind, I have been associating uh, Constance Kamii with math, like maybe specifically math.
Yep.
And I think maybe that's one of the reasons I haven't been super curious.
Mhm.
So I had no idea that like the quote that you read about autonomy and that we have to think about the social and emotional. I would not have guessed that that was a strong piece of her work because that's not, I didn't dig deep enough, I guess.
Oh, I think, um, yeah, I think that part of it is that her evolution as a scholar
Uh-huh.
is they worked very strongly in the 60s and 70s and into the 80s and focused on preschool. And then, and actually, I have this little wee book. This was like the price on it is $2. So it's
Like the
not,
original price, not the used bookstore price. It was originally $2.
it's like I must have, I don't know how long I've had it, but Piaget Children in Number.
Uh-huh.
And so gradually she became much more interested in how children construct an understanding of mathematics
Uh-huh.
and I worked her way up,
Yeah.
went to the University of Alabama, into kindergarten, first grade, second grade, and really trying to understand how autonomy fit in with how we
Okay.
help children construct an understanding of math. And
Uh-huh.
actually, she was her whole, I don't know, 2 or 3 decades worth of her work focused on primarily on math.
Uh-huh.
And like she was on the advisory board of not only the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics, but I also found that she was on the advisory board of DEY, Defending Early Years,
Oh, okay.
and for them wrote a position statement on why she was against the Common Core for K
Oh.
through
So,
3.
and I've read that. I just, all these pieces are coming back to me now. You're connecting it all for me. And not that I have anything against learning about how children do math, learn math. It just wasn't a draw
It,
for me, so I didn't dig deeper.
Right. And I
Yeah.
think that's, I mean, that's one of the things I was thinking about as I was kind of doing this revisiting of both of them was that it's natural that we all, our interests change over time
Sure.
as
Yeah.
whatever we learn. She was very involved in creating math programs for children in a lower income area. She had her own school or was a part of a school project out of University of Alabama to really understand how children learn math and how what we traditionally do doesn't work. And
Okay. Nice.
but that's just what we know. She also, I guess I'll like go a little bit further with her. She also wrote a book on or edited a book on language, like how constructivism should be a theoretical framework for the whole language movement back in the 90s, and why the way we were teaching reading missed the point of autonomy and how children actually really develop. Um, and she also wrote or edited a book on achievement testing
Oh,
called
wow.
Achievement Testing in the Early Grades, the Games Grown-ups Play. And this was in 1990.
Okay.
And it said, again, we are missing the point of what we need to be doing with children if we think that achievement testing is going to give us any valuable information or
Yeah.
guide teaching and learning
Okay.
and development, because it's anti what we want to see going on with children, real children in classrooms. And that was in 1990. So
Yeah.
it was like a decade before No Child Left
We
Behind.
can we can add her voice to the voice of women in the 90s that had it right about early childhood and we ignored for decades and decades. The 90s and earlier, I guess.
Earlier, right? Um, so, um, so yeah, she definitely, but and I believe it's because one of the things that I really looked at in the 70s when I was discovering them and reading all like everything that they ever written, including this little pile of papers, was they were very strong on considering the fact that the way Piaget's theory had been translated. I mean, she spoke French. She
Hmm.
grew up in Switzerland, so she spoke French as a first language. But both the translation and the dissemination of his theory, even in the 70s, they said was becoming the programs that were taking it and saying that they were using it as their foundation
Hmm.
were actually missing the big picture.
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, including Weikart, who she said some very positive things about, but she said the Perry Preschool Project, which there's a lot of research that supports like how powerful it was.
Hmm.
She said that what was most powerful about that was when they were not trying to adhere to Piaget's theory, that they were just doing good
I
development.
think that's the case with most of those core studies we use to talk about the great return on investment for early childhood. I think it's not about the curriculum when we really dig in.
It's relationships
Yeah,
and
yeah,
and,
yeah,
and the kind of atmosphere that we set for children so
yeah.
that they truly develop and learn. So I'm
Huh.
going to like wing
Yeah.
out another quote here.
Okay.
Because it kind of ties in.
Yeah.
So this is from a book that she and DeVries wrote in 1978, and then it was reissued with some changes in 1993. And from Physical Knowledge in the Preschool, or it's called Physical Knowledge in the Preschool Classroom, Implications of Piaget's Theory. And they start with what should the objectives of education be? And they start with socio-emotional, which I think right there, like in this pretty
Yeah.
stunning. And it's for the child to become increasingly more autonomous with a context of generally non-coercive relationships with adults. That is number freaking
Mm-hmm.
one that
Mm-hmm.
they list, which is so in tune with Suzanne's work, with all of our, well, like what we all believe. Two, respect the feelings and rights of others and being able to cooperate through decentering and coordinating different points of view
Hmm.
to objective. And we can talk a little bit more about that in a minute. Be alert and curious and use initiative in pursuing curiosities, to have confidence in his ability to figure things out for him or herself, and to speak their minds with conviction.
Mm.
Those are
I
their
like
top
it.
three goals, right? And then cognitive, uh, come up with a variety of ideas, problems, and questions, and put objects and events into relationships and notice similarities and differences.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's
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 play.
plan.
Yeah.
It's all of the things that we're
Yeah.
really passionate about.
Yeah.
And so the two of them together like set forth this. I mean, it's actually I hadn't looked at it for decades on physical knowledge, but it really is a wonderful primer for the kinds of things that we are all now. I guess what's frustrating to me, and I was thinking like maybe that's why both of them kind of like did their own thing and like I mean they continued to publish, but
Yeah.
they didn't stay mainstream because the frustration of having said the same freaking thing for 60 years.
Yes.
No, it's like, okay, nobody's listening to me.
Yes. I think that's probably spot on. Like I can't.
I know, I
Yeah.
feel it. And as I was going back and reading through a lot of this stuff, I was like, if I'm feeling it as just a
Uh-huh.
lowly person who just like has been kind of like doing the work for all these years, I didn't have any revolutionary theories.
Mm-hmm.
They did, and to be able to have figured that out. So together, they after that book, they also wrote a book called Group Games: Implications of Piaget's Theory, which it really focuses in on the social and emotional and why they focus on games as opposed to more open-ended play. But the reason for it I thought was really interesting because they said the Piaget's whole push is that part of development is being able to de-center, to get outside of your own head and recognize that other people have different points of view and perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And that includes and what way, how do children do that better than through play
Mm-hmm.
and through these they don't they're not talking about games necessarily. I mean, they do hit on board games, but they're talking about chase. They're talking about
Yeah.
younger children play as well,
You're
and
right.
how
Invented by children and the rules are set by the
ended by
children. And
yes, all of that stuff.
mm,
But they show how it really ties into, again, autonomy. Because
mhm.
if you're truly going to, there's another little quote here. I can't find it. If you're truly going to focus on autonomy as being the primary directive for education, then you need to offer kids the opportunity to be able to independently see other points of view and independently judge whether it's right or wrong, both in the social, emotional, and moral realm, but also in the intellectual realm. I
Mhm.
agree or don't agree with it.
Uh-huh.
So anyway, that's group games they came
Yeah.
up with again together.
Yeah.
DeVries, after that point in time, kind of pivoted in a little bit different direction. And she wrote a book called Moral, I have it right here, but I put her on the wrong page. Moral Classrooms, Moral Children, Creating a Constructivist Atmosphere in Early Education.
Hmm.
Now, she had worked quite extensively with your buddy Lawrence Kohlberg.
My buddy.
I
Yeah, I
I know. A
know.
little bit sarcastic there,
Yes, that was funny.
but um, what she did is she took this idea of autonomy and decentering and said this is how we build relationships in classrooms
Mhm.
with so that children can develop and have their curiosity and all of these things, but focusing more on the relationship piece as opposed to like the stuff,
Uh-huh.
the knowledge and the logical mathematical knowledge
Yeah.
stuff is that classroom environment is critical. And I mean, we know it's true. We
Mhm.
know we've all seen programs that are play based where there's no independent thinking going
Right.
on at all.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah. So she also like she didn't leave physical knowledge behind. A lot of her really quirky, I mean, interesting research, kind of splinter research is on shadows and the construction of children's construction of their understanding of shadows,
Oh,
which is
wow.
so so fun.
Right.
Anyway, so
Yeah.
that's who
Uh-huh.
they are in
Yeah.
a snippet nutshell. I'd love to talk more about it with you, but I guess to me, as I like think about it, I will get this one quote. Uh, they said, in Piaget's theory, autonomy means the ability to take relevant factors into account and make decisions for oneself about right and wrong in the moral realm and about truth and untruth in the intellectual realm, independently of reward and punishment.
Mm.
And I look at where we are as a society today in this country.
Hmm.
And you know what? We are what Piaget and what Camille and DeVries and what everybody knows is in a heteronymous, is that how you pronounce it?
Yeah.
So we are doing, they would like us to do what we are told to do as opposed
Right.
to what we actually honestly think and evaluate as true or not true or right or wrong. And I look back at this 50 years since I've been familiar with them and what's happened to the education system in this country,
Yeah.
including in our early childhood field, which would seem to have the most flexibility of any of them. And I wonder if there's not a link of
Hmm.
having not paid attention to scholars like Camille and DeVries.
Yeah, I think that link could be made. Thank you. I took lots of notes, and I think we should continue conversations um, in in the future about some of this stuff. I'm finding myself during this run of the Matriarch series, um, doing what listeners tell me I do to them, where I have a pile of books to read now based on the people that I'm listening to and the people who are coming on to talk. So I guess I know what they feel like now. Okay, Suzanne, it's your turn. Who are you going to talk
Yeah.
to us
But
about?
now I realize who you're talking about. Like the first time you said it, I couldn't work out what you said. So it was
Oh.
like a sound. And this is problems where I think I realize I listen through my skin just as much as I do with my ears and eyes, and I can't pick everything up
Uh-huh.
online. So there you
Fascinating.
go.
But now you've got it.
Yeah. So sometimes it just takes a while for the penny to drop and things. It's like the first few words of a conversation on the telephone. I hear nothing. I
Interesting.
will. So yeah.
All right.
All right. I have gone further back in history. And I have chosen Swedish women because I thought that this would bring something different to the table. And they didn't live at the same time, so there's a bit of a gap between them. So Ellen Key is the first person, and she was born in 1849. And she's most famous for her book, which was published in Swedish in 1900 and in English in 1909, called Pioneering the Century of a Child.
The
Mm.
Century of the Child?
Yeah, because it was written in
Oh, oh,
1900,
oh.
and the
Yeah.
idea was to put children at the center of education. And this was written at a time when education was very authoritarian. very strict.
Uh-huh.
And so she wanted to dream of a better future of education where the children were at the center and the focus on creativity and curiosity and pretty much everything you've just been saying so far was has been said for over a century.
Yeah.
And, and I think it makes it even more shocking that it's not
And
been.
it was probably considered progressive at the time, and
It
we would
was
still call
considered
it
extremely
progressive.
progressive.
Like we haven't progressed. We still think the
Yeah.
progressive stuff from
Yes.
1900 is progressive.
And Ellen Key also wrote a lot about motherhood and sexuality as well. Um, and that also raised quite a few eyebrows, especially amongst the more conservative people. Um, she believed that education can give you a skill, but a liberal education can give you dignity. That's one of her quotes.
I love that. Yes.
Yeah.
Agreed.
But then when you're reading her actual book, she talks about the child's right to be naughty.
Oh, I'm
I
intrigued.
know, I know. It's kind of that kind of puts it like you're thinking, what does that mean? And we have different words. We have a word called busig, which is a more cheeky kind of naughty.
Uh-huh.
Um, but she feels like she was advocating for the fact that children need to be able to make mistakes. Children need to be this kind of that naughty side without it being interfered with, and that is a part of childhood, and that we shouldn't be expecting this perfect adult like creature when they're young because they're supposed to have these moments.
Mm,
And she quotes a few situations of that she'd met a child that the parents had chastised this 2-year-old for doing something that the parents didn't like. And it says it's what a normal 2-year-old does.
hmm
And then she quoted a 6-year-old boy who had been to church and had been told about the virtues of heaven and what he needed to be a good boy to be able to go to heaven. And had then gone to his mum and said, I want to go to heaven and I'll be a good boy, but on Saturdays, can I go to hell to play with the naughty boys? And so she was advocating for a very different way of thinking
I want
about
that on a
children.
t-shirt.
I want to play with the naughty boys on Saturday in hell.
Oh my gosh, that's so interesting.
Yeah. So Ellen Key is one of the people that we study. She has a little statue and a playground and everything here in
Oh wow.
Stockholm. And she has influenced not only in Sweden, but in Europe and also apparently in North America. So I have no idea. So she was a
Hmm.
worldwide influencer on the education system of shifting it from that authoritarian to the whole child approach. Um,
Uh-huh.
I mean, her whole thing was about fighting for equality for everyone.
Uh-huh.
Well, it will be from a very white basis. So when I say
Right,
everyone,
yeah. Yeah,
it's never actually everyone, is it?
right.
Um, so education, she believed, is not just about imparting facts, but about cultivating creativity, compassion, and a lifelong love of learning, which also feels like it connects to what you've just been saying. As and her legacy calls on us to view education as a force for a more humane and equitable world.
Uh-huh.
So, and I felt that she felt right for the times that we're in at the moment.
Mhm.
And that leads me to Alva Myrdal. I don't know how
Okay.
you English. Is it Alva is A-L-V-A.
ALVA. Okay.
Myrdal is Myrdal.
Okay. Uh-huh.
I don't know how you would say it.
Uh-huh.
Myrdal in Swedish.
Uh-huh.
Um, she's actually got a Nobel Prize in peace for peace.
Oh
She got the
wow.
Peace Prize. And she got the Peace Prize for her work in seeing early childhood education as a way to create peace.
Oh my
And so
goodness.
her active work, she is also one of the people, her and her husband, behind the social welfare system here in Sweden. and women's rights and children's rights to a good quality preschool education or care, full day care, with staff that were properly trained. And also
Yeah.
back into the whole child. So the whole child, the whole day. So not just training the child in education, but seeing the whole child and kind of nurturing the whole child.
What was her time frame? When is she
So,
working?
so she was busy in the 30s, 1930s,
Okay.
changing the welfare system. When did she get her Nobel Peace Prize? A little bit later on.
Okay. I mean,
But
I know that's Googleable,
I think
but
she
I thought
died in the
maybe,
1980s.
okay, interesting. And so had you, if I'm remembering right, how long have you lived in Sweden
I have
and
lived
worked in
in
Sweden?
Sweden since 1992.
Oh, okay. Had you heard of her before you were in Sweden, or was it
No,
like, oh, okay.
no,
So we've got all these stories being kept
from each other.
too close to home and not out in
Yeah.
the world. Yeah. Huh.
And Alva Myrdal is the person who is behind OMEP.
What's that?
You don't know what OMEP is?
I don't think so.
OMEP is it stands for the World Organization of Early Childhood Education. Men OMEP is Organisation Mondiale Education Préscolaire, typ.
Okay. Okay.
So it is the World Organization for Early Childhood Education.
Uh-huh.
And it's connected to UNICEF.
Okay.
And UNICEF before Alva Myrdal didn't really think about preschool age children. They focus from school children upwards.
Uh-huh.
And so Alva Myrdal has made that sh global shift.
Okay.
At the end of the Second World War, she created she created a conference in Prague for educators and leaders to meet with the idea of creating peace through early childhood education, so that what the teachers were doing were teaching children so that they could live in peace and think about peace and not just follow people. So
Uh-huh.
this was even before like Malaguzzi was saying, oh, Malaguzzi was saying the same sort of things at the same time.
Uh-huh. That's what I was just
So it's hard to
gonna
know.
say.
So the chances are that he got that from her.
Uh-huh.
I don't know.
Uh-huh.
He was organizing this at the end of the war, and he was thinking about this at the end of the war. But I mean, he was motivated by women too.
Yeah.
So it wasn't him. He was asked by the women, the mothers, to create something so that children in the future wouldn't just follow a fascist leader, that they would have the strength
Interesting.
to make their own decisions. And this
Yeah.
is the same what Alva Myrdal was trying to do with early childhood education as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I love to think about him being influenced by a woman for that, just
Yeah,
because
isn't
we
that?
know it's
Yes,
probably truer than we can demonstrate, right? That
yes,
even the
yes.
old white guys in my theory chapter probably didn't get there alone, you know.
Yeah.
I
No,
think I've
but I
heard
mean, it
about,
was the women in Italy that were asking him that this is what they wanted.
yeah, yeah,
I mean, Piaget worked with Bärbel Inhelder, and
uh-huh.
another one of my mentors who might be next year's matriarch, met McCarthy Gallagher. She strongly said, told me once, she said, you know what, Bärbel, like a lot of his later ideas, which were so influential, they were Bärbel's, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I was gonna say when you were talking, even Stephanie, that I've heard that, or like he had what would be like the equivalent of grad assistants doing a lot of the work at different points, and a lot of it was women. And but I've never seen it documented. I just think
And there's lots of talk about Einstein was it's mostly his wife,
yes,
and that once they separated, he didn't come up with any great theories anymore.
And Jung too. There was
oh right,
did some kind of like splinter research years ago, and I was like, oh, I can't remember what the woman's name was, but
uh-huh,
he was very influential in the development of his theory on
yeah,
imagination. So
yeah.
Oh,
There's
but
stuff to be
maybe
teased.
this is also a theme, the fact that women are not being listened to.
Yes.
And that's why the words of men are the words that then get put into action, and the words of women are constantly being ignored.
Uh-huh.
Even though there's lots of, like throughout history, men saying exactly the same thing. Um,
Yeah. Well, that hasn't changed either. I mean,
You too? You too? I will listen to you too.
right. Where there's efforts being made, but uh I just it continues. I mean, I'm just thinking about just sitting in a meeting with I have taken on a role in a meeting that I'm regularly part of lately where I'm not really even talking much, but I am pointing out when the guys repeat something that the women said and we're not, like, yeah, I think that's what she said a minute ago, and just making those connections because I feel like it's still, still a fight that we're fighting. Um, but yeah, because so many of these, we've had conversations about more modern women in these matriarchy conversations, but we're also really digging deep into centuries of the work of women that's not being included in textbooks. Like Gemma Medina talked about Caroline Pratt, and we all know that, oh yeah, wooden unit blocks, but it's so much deeper than that, right? Her work was so much more um, could have been so much more influential, continuing to be more influential. But so that's part of why I love these conversations, to make these connections and see the work over the years. And
And for me, my work in Swedish preschools is so influenced by the fact that Myrdal created this welfare system. And that then, it is, I mean, 95% of preschool children attend preschool here because it's a
uh-huh,
universal preschool.
uh-huh,
Play is the word that it's supposed to be. Democracy is in the first sentence. Equity is throughout it.
hmm
So that this, I think for me, it's like these people, we're still living their legacy, still
yeah,
very much alive and a part of what we're doing. But I feel like it's also very much under threat
yeah,
um, of being changed, of being schoolified, of
hmm
moving away from the curious, autonomous child to the compliant, fill them with facts child.
hmm yeah, yeah. Were you going to say something, Stephanie?
I mean, so I don't know if Suzanne, if either of you know, I lived in Finland while I was for 4 years in high school. I lived in Sweden when I was a younger child, but
Oh, okay.
I've done lots of looping back into the Finnish educational system, and I'm wondering, and their early childhood system is very much based on equality and
hmm
equity and all of that as well. And I'm wondering, I mean, that makes sense that now that this woman probably also influenced or may very well have influenced what has gone on in Finland.
Oh,
When I
yes.
read their standards, it was all about it was wonderful, and they don't teach children to read until they're 7, and
hmm
Yeah. The
formal,
same here.
yeah, I
I
mean,
was
so
that was going to ask Suzanne, when you talked about universal
um,
preschool, when does formal school start and when? So they,
And that's our tragedy. That's our thing that we're working with, is that they want to do it. The formal school starts at age 7,
uh-huh,
and they want to start it at age
to
6.
push it down.
Yeah,
Yep.
they're pushing it down. And
Yeah.
we had this original idea of having, which I think is genius, the preschool class. So what used to be when you're 6 years old, your last year of preschool, they moved it into the school environment. So you had this year of play to get used to your school and get
Oh,
used to
okay.
your group. So that when
Uh-huh.
you started first grade, you then were this class that understood and trusted each other and could continue. And the other thought behind it was that they could pre-schoolify the school system.
Yeah.
But of
Okay.
course, it hasn't worked like that. Instead, it's moved towards schoolifying the preschool instead. So it's had the
Yeah.
absolute effect.
I think that's happened quite a bit in this country too, except for
Mm,
brought down even lower with a lot of the
mm.
universal preschool, pre-K programs. They were like, okay, we're going to help all of the elementary people understand what early childhood is all about. And instead it's flipped
It
the
gets
other
pushed down. Yeah.
Yeah.
direction.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, I'm really fighting that in Indiana right now because of our new science of reading law, that all the schools have to use science of reading, and all the colleges that prepare teachers have to teach it. So we're packing a lot of science of reading into our early childhood classes. And when I say things like we have to make sure that this doesn't result in a further push down, I sometimes get kind of blank stares, like they're not really sure what I mean. It's like, well, I mean, I don't want that explicit instruction formal system that you're showing us in a 3-year-old
Mm.
classroom, in a 5-year-old classroom for that matter. So I think uh I mean we're already there here in the States. We're already schoolified
Yeah.
um
Yeah.
with some resistance, but primarily schoolification is seen as quality. And when we're talking about quality early childhood, to go back to what we were talked about with the Perry Preschool Project and the other, we've got the research that we use as a soundbite, but we're not digging deeply enough to see what was really happening day to day in those programs
Mm.
that we're holding up. And it sounds like Sweden maybe has it a little better.
You know,
Yeah, we're a little further behind in the schoolification process, but
Yeah, but it's looming, you think?
yeah, it's looming. And it's like people always think of, oh, we're a socialist country, that there's we have a far right majority in our
Uh-huh.
government right at the moment. Far right.
Ugh,
Just like a lot of places in the world. And so this is making changes
sure.
and on on women, on children, on everything basically, because
Yeah.
and changing the equity parts of our
Hmm.
preschool
Yeah.
curriculums, which I think when you go back to Alva Myrdal and what she was trying to do, and definitely Ellen Key, where they were trying to do with equity, I think we also have to look at them as problematic characters as well,
Oh,
because Alva Myrdal was also into eugenics.
uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's this wonderful side of her of doing all of these amazing things, but there's also this darker side of what kind of people they wanted in
Right.
these
How interesting.
too.
Uh, equity except for, right?
Except for, and this, I think
as
this is
long
it
as,
is
Yeah.
problematic,
Yes.
and it's like you look at the history of democracy as well, and the suffragettes and women's rights
Yeah.
and feminism. All of this is extremely problematic because democracy has never meant everyone. Democracy
Hmm.
used to mean rich white men,
Yeah.
and then the poor white men had to fight for their vote, and then no, so
Yeah.
everyone's had to fight for their right to be able to vote and to participate
Hmm.
in a democracy,
Hmm.
while the system is constantly fighting to keep it exclusive.
Yeah. And there's
And in the US
always
at the
someone left
moment, thing
out.
in the opposite direction. I
Mhm.
listened to a podcast that said by summer democracy is done in the US if it continues the way it
Oh
is at the
man.
moment. Oh my God.
how
Yeah.
big is your house, Suzanne?
Yeah.
Everyone's welcome.
Um,
I will get extra mattresses.
Oh my God, that would be a party for about 2 days, and then we'd be real super tired of each other.
um,
Yep.
Go ahead, Stephanie.
I have been for my whole career really passionately believing that what we need is some kind of a unified theory that we can go back and forth with as far as what it is that is like, does it fit this theory or does it not? And that comes from this idea that where I went to undergrad, I got trained in behaviorism, and then I like poofed into constructivism and with Piaget and Camille and
Yeah.
DeVries, the whole thing. And as my whole career, I have fought with people about the fact that theory can be good. And if your theory is coming from a place of uh, Piaget, that Camille said in something I read, that the reason that she had continued to work with Piaget and they had continued to develop his theory was because it was the most comprehensive theory at that time that
Mm.
went from birth through adolescence and really into adulthood. And if you take it big picture, like into the history of the world kind of thing. And that if we don't have some kind of, and I know there are plenty of criticisms, even back in the 70s, I saw there are plenty of criticisms, but if we have a unified theory that says whatever we do, how does it juxtapose with this theory? It doesn't mean it's a cookbook. It means like
Hmm.
how does it compare? And I found consistently that people are anti-theory in this country.
Yeah.
I mean, nobody, oh yeah, that there's theory and there's practice. And
Yeah.
I wonder if in our field, I mean, we keep coming up with new ideas and new theories, but do they fit into,
I
is
have
there,
this wonderful way of explaining it that we get that I will show you an image. It's simple. It's like, oh, it won't show up. You see, it's just
Oh,
circles.
we can't really see. I
Like
see
you can't really see
circles.
it.
Yeah.
Oh, no. It's three circles
Uh-huh.
inside each other.
Uh-huh.
And ideally, the middle circle, the one in the inside, is what you bring to the table. So your kind of your baggage,
Uh-huh.
your being, your personal knowledge. Then the next one is your experience, your practice. So practice. And the last one is your theory.
okay.
So
Uh-huh.
what you've learned, the theories behind it,
Oh.
so that you understand, because that's what theory is. It's your understanding of your practice,
Mm.
technically. And when you're listening to theories, when you read theories, it is understanding the practice, the theorizing the practice, that's
Oh,
the
okay.
thinking behind the practice, isn't it, technically?
Yeah.
Mhm.
And what happens is that some people have a very big practice. So they're doing lots of things and a very small ring of their theory, which means they don't think a lot about what it is that they're doing. They're just doing it.
Uh-huh.
But the problem is when someone criticizes their work, as in critiques their work, as
Uh-huh.
in how they can do it better, they have not very much theory to protect them. So it becomes like
Ooh,
an
theory to
insult.
protect them.
Yeah, so the
Sorry, I have to write
theory
that
is
down.
there to protect their practice. That there's Swedish
Yeah.
coming out. This is the way. While other people, some people have loads of theory but very little practice.
Uh-huh.
So they don't walk the talk.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
then some people have their enormous self. This is me. This is who I am. And very little practice and very little theory. And I
Yeah.
think it's such a good way
Suzanne, you
of,
froze.
We got her. We got her.
you get me?
Yeah.
Everyone's freezing. It's like everyone's taking turns to
Uh-oh.
freeze all the time at the moment for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're both frozen.
So, uh, uh, Suzanne, are you writing about this right
Not, but I
now? Oh,
can put a little post together.
yeah.
I think I might have actually written a post about this at some point.
Okay.
I've shared it with people
Yeah.
various times, and every
We
time I've
just,
shared it, they're going, "Oh my God, this is so amazing."
yeah, so I'm teaching, and it's almost time to wrap up, but I'm teaching right now our capstone class for the associate's degree students. They take that in their last 8 weeks before they graduate. And we're revisiting theory because they've had it in each
Mm,
class, but now, of course, you revisit, you get more complexity each time you revisit. And I always use this quote from Carol Garhart Mooney from her book, Theories of Childhood, where she's talking about surveying child care center directors and about theory and what they want their teachers to be able to know and do. And the overwhelming answer was, so it's not a quote, it's a paraphrase. The overwhelming answer was, we don't care if they know Vygotsky and Piaget, but we do want teachers who know what to do when children hit or bite. And what they're missing is that the teachers who know what to do when children hit or bite probably are pulling from theory. And I don't know that
Mhm.
I 100% agree with that, but I think there is a point that that's why I love what you said, that they don't have a theory to protect them when their practice
Mhm.
is examined. Um, uh, so I love I'm just sort of processing out loud for you all now, but I'm packing that away. I've got a whole list
But
of
I think
just
for me, when
phrases
I
you
did
both
my
have thrown
master's,
in. Go ahead.
after I'd worked a lot of years in early childhood.
Yeah, me
And
too.
so for me, going into the theory, it made me understand all of my practice
Uh-huh.
so much more.
Okay.
And when I then continued my practice, it was done with a whole lot of much more of
Uh-huh.
intentionality. And I also knew how to explain it to the parents and make connections. It wasn't just things I did.
Uh-huh.
I was understanding the history of what I was doing and where I'd learnt this from and why I was doing this and how it connected to the brain or psychology and this, that, and the other. So it did make sense. So I think definitely it's part of protecting our practice,
Yeah.
but it's also part of deepening our
Yeah.
practice. So it's so interwoven that there are some people who can do practice amazingly because they're so intuitive
Hmm.
and they haven't got these lessons, but they do have theories.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. And just before we're done, I want to go back to that idea of having a unifying theory, Stephanie, that you brought in, because I agree. Like, I wish that we had this standard way of being, but you know, the dominant voices are the ones that get to dis establish what a unifying theory might be. And so right now, I definitely don't want to have any kind of work done towards that, because in the States right now, the dominant discourse is really, I think, harmful.
I agree 100%.
Yeah.
I guess,
But wouldn't it be lovely if we could just all say, we're developmentalists
right.
now, and this is how we're gonna, this is our schema, and we'll do all our accommodating and assimilating according to the schema.
And that honestly is what, as I've gone back and dipped into all of these pieces of my life, I reread my part of my thesis and all this,
Uh-huh.
realized that that is what Camille and DeVries did for me.
Hmm.
It gave me this schema
Uh-huh.
for what development looked like and what early
Mm.
childhood and on what development looked like no matter what
Right.
age. And that
Right.
it created in me a way to reflect on myself as a developmentalist in all
Uh-huh.
the work that I've ever done with any age group.
Yeah.
And that to me is powerful. And and I fit in other things. I read Suzanne's work, I read your work, and I'm like, okay, so that expands, and I read something that is a strict behaviorist approach, and I'm like, no,
Yeah.
does not fit in with my understanding of what development is all about. And I
Right.
think that's like an amoeba theory is what we kind
All right. This was so much fun. I could have listened to each of you talk for another hour. So maybe we'll do that another day. Come and talk to me for more hours. So I appreciate you both being here, especially
of.
on a Saturday. Appreciate it. And sharing your enthusiasm for these women that we all should know more about now. And thanks everybody who's listening for listening to another episode. We'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye.
La la